This is my literary research presentation. So, my research question was, what do researchers suggest are best practices of the English language arts content area? I found this interesting because in my methods course, we are also going over best practices throughout the semester and kind of relating that to our content area. So my thesis was, researchers suggest many best practices that educators have found to work across the content area of English language arts. My paper focuses on classroom environment, the writing process, genre-based writing instruction, communication, and academic language. This is a really broad topic. Of course, there are several best practices that researchers have found that work well in classrooms. It would be probably impossible to list all of them, but I just picked out a few that I thought related to this class and I thought had the good academic journal and good studies that stood behind them. So, what are the purposes of each article I chose? So, I just kind of listed the articles that are included in my paper and I put the purpose underneath. The purpose I found for each article really kind of summarizes what this best practice is and what the study was kind of trying to achieve. So, the first one was students' perception of the condition of their classroom physical learning environment. So this best practice was covering the classroom environment. So having a positive and safe classroom environment. So this article aimed to obtain research on diverse students' perceptions of their classroom and how that impacted their learning and motivation. This article's main purpose focuses on determining if student perception has anything to do with student learning and motivation. And obviously the results were astounding. In the better the classroom environment was, the more positive it was, the more student achievement that the schools had. And in the conclusion, the author of the entire study said that classroom environment was number one across the board for student success. The second one I chose was teaching practices used for developing English writing skill at the secondary level. This covered the writing process. The purpose of the study was to identify the teaching practices used by secondary level teachers for developing writing skills. The teachers sat down and reviewed the different steps of the writing process and took data from student work to see what part of the writing process the students were having trouble with and what part of the writing process the students kind of had already. I think this is very important because a lot of times teachers kind of skip over the writing process when it is very, very crucial that we break down each and every step, because writing is super intimidating. But when you break it down into a process, step by step, I think it's less intimidating and it's more achievable for the students. The third one was conceptualizing instructional strategies towards communication competence among students. So this article was about communication between teachers and students. The purpose of this case study was to present a framework of effective instructional strategies as an antecedent towards student communication and interaction among students. I found this article to be so relevant in today's time, especially after post-pandemic. The education world really took a hit. We have learning from a distance. Some schools got shut down. And I know that 2020 seems so far away, but really, lots of kids lack social skills and collaborative skills because they missed out on those projects that entire school year. So the fact that communication, that best practice of having a clear communication and collaborative work with students is so important. And I think it's more important than ever in today's society now, especially after post-pandemic. But this study just showed that when students were engaged and when they were working in collaborative groups, that their student achievement was higher than doing independent work. There was 5 different methods of this study. It was independent study, direct instruction, indirect instruction, and there was one more, I think it was interactive lecture. And it was just different ways of instructional strategies that teachers could use to foster communication between students and teachers. The next article was examination of genre-based strategy instruction in middle school English language arts and science. The purpose of this study was to study the effects of instructional intervention and its professional development on the delivery of argumentative writing instruction in middle school. So basically taking the writing process and critiquing it specifically on the genre of what you're writing. So if you are writing an argumentative essay, how does the writing process look kind of different than it does compared to writing a narrative? I thought this was really interesting because I didn't really think of it in that way, but it showed percentages of student data and student achievement when teachers did professional development over genre-based strategy instruction and incorporated it in their classroom, and how the grades kind of look different after that different approach to teaching writing based on genre specifically. So that best practice would be genre-based strategy instruction. And lastly, the relationship between academic word use and reading comprehension for students from diverse backgrounds. So this one basically covered academic language. And I know over the past couple semesters, that's all we hear is academic language, academic language. But the purpose of this project was to first describe the use of academic language in writing language samples and to examine the predictive relation between academic language use in writing and reading comprehension. So basically it showed percentages of students who could correctly use academic language in terms of just speaking everyday language with the use of academic language and how their writing and reading comprehensions grades were compared to if they understood academic language, which in my head it makes sense. If students don't understand the academic language, then how do we expect them to succeed in our objectives? Which is so important, and it's so important to teach academic language. I know a lot of the time we hear use academic language in your lesson plans, or teachers always use academic language in their conversations, but students should be using academic language also, and they should be learning it as well. So what is the importance? As educators, it is very important to be knowledgeable about research-based best practices and be able to accommodate the specific needs of our students. Researchers suggest these practices to help and not hurt. So the facts are the facts. There's data out there to support what the researchers are saying about these different best practices that they're putting into use. Keep in mind that not every practice will perfectly suit every student. You may have to make accommodations for certain best practices. It's not going to be 100% every single time you use one. When you are a teacher, you are also a student. As teachers, we are always learning and expanding our knowledge on how to better accommodate our students. And here's my Works Cited page.